What's good YouTube? I thought I'd do a video on me finally hitting 3000 score in Mythic Plus on my Hunter. I've managed to do this mainly through pugging, which has definitely been a bit of a grind because I've just been sat in the dungeon queue finder for literally the past 3 months. But nevertheless, we finally got there, and with the season coming to an end, at least from an interest perspective in most people's cases, I thought I'd just piece together a few clips from the last couple of keys that I did to finally get me above that 3k threshold. For these keys, I'm just going to show you the high points and low points of these keys just because you've probably seen these dungeons 1,000 times already. So let's get it going. So we started off with a 25 Shadowmoon Burial Grounds, which is actually the highest key I've done this season, and I'm pretty impressed with myself that I actually managed to get up this high. I know it is only Shadowmoon Burial Ground, so it's technically about a 23. But anyway, the number still counts. So we start off with this first pool, as you do. I know in higher keys, like the top keys, a lot of people will skip this first pack with Shroud and then Invis Pot or whatever, vice versa, to get down to the bottom level quicker. And they skip these first 3 mobs, but we just decided to go with the standard route. Me and the monk are pumping here, but we do unfortunately take a while to kill this pack. The Balance Druid, I think, was going to save his cooldowns for the second pack, but unfortunately, it just did take a little bit too long, which meant that when we got down to the altar because of the Void Spawn patrol, when the warrior charged in, another Void Spawn actually spawned on top of the altar, and then it meant we pulled him, which is obviously no bueno. Like, you do not want to pull this guy at this point just because you can't line of sight the Void Pulse cast, which, as you can see, is absolutely chunking our group. We do decide to send a Lust here, obviously just to get it on cooldown. Normally, you'd probably send this on the first boss, but I'm sure just because we accidentally pulled this big guy as well, that we needed to do anything we could to survive. So we're pumping here. I'm using a defensive for each single Void Pulse. Obviously, you can see that I've used the Fortitude of the Bear. I've already used my Survival of the Fittest. I've just used my Turtle as well. So now I am hot out of cooldowns. And then our tank goes down, followed by the rest of our group. Though we do manage to just finish off the Void Pulse just in time before I get taken out. So we run back down. Obviously, in Shadowmoon Burial Grounds, you have a lot of time to actually complete the key. And we had 1 Loyalist and Spirit left that we just cleaned up. After this, we get the first boss down, nothing really to note here, and then we go into one of the harder pools in this dungeon, if not the only hard pools in this dungeon. We've got one after the first boss and one directly after the second boss. There's 2 ways that you can do these kind of packs. Obviously, you can interrupt the domination cast on the side for the guys that are RPing. However, this does mean you're going to have a lot more kicks. That's why I normally take Wailing Arrow as a hunter going into these dungeons. But in this case, we actually leave them up. This means that they take less damage, but it means we don't have to deal with their domination cast, where they're going to mind control one of your group and you're probably going to end up dead from it. So we decided to just play it safe, and then towards the end of the pack, the Druid actually Typhoons the mobs to interrupt them, and then I send a Wailing Arrow on them. And also we get a leg sweep just to finish them off without too much trouble. After this pack, you have the 2 Exhumers, and if you actually wait for both of the Exhumers to get down the bottom, then when they cast their Exhume the Crypt spell, they will actually only spawn the Exhume Spirits at the bottom, which cast the Death Blasts. So that's a cheeky little way to skip the Spirits at the top of this ramp and have to deal with less Death Blasts, because obviously we never want to deal with those. But again, pretty simple pack, just keep your interrupt on cooldown, basically interrupting those Void Bolts, and make sure the Death Blasts do not go off. Skipping over to the Worm boss then, nothing really again to note here. Like, it is just the longest boss in the world. It is so bloody boring, but unfortunately it is a big time sink in this dungeon. If this boss was hard, people would have much more of a problem with this dungeon. And just in general, like, Shadowmoon is a very boring and linear dungeon. The only reason people actually like this dungeon is because it's so easy. Obviously at a point it becomes quite difficult with the key level, but yeah, people would not want to run this dungeon at all if it was scaled properly as well. You can mess up quite a bit in this dungeon and still get away with it on the timer. Obviously you can see we got 6 deaths, we had a full wipe at the start, and we're still almost going to 2-chest this key. Coming up to the last 2 Void Spawns then, very scary mobs, especially on Fortified at a key level like this. So as a BM Hunter, I can do my best to try and LOS or line of sight every Void Pulse cast. I imagine it's probably a lot harder as an actual caster to keep doing decent damage while doing this. Obviously you can see the Boomy struggling a little bit with damage. They're still pumping, but when you've got a hard cast instead of me just running about like a lunatic on my BM Hunter and lining pretty much every Void Pulse cast, it must be a lot more difficult. But as you can see, I have got all my defensives on cooldown because I did have to eat a few here when the Void Eruptions come out and place the swirlies on the ground where we're trying to hide. So my Fortitude of the Bear, Survival of the Fittest and Turtle is again all on cooldown. Life of a hunter, hey? But we take these guys down without too much trouble and move on to the last boss. which actually really surprised me. Considering it's a fortified key, I didn't think this boss was going to be as hard as it was. The Omen of Death casts actually pump us. Even if you run away as quickly as you can, you still take a lot of damage, causing the druid to fall over near the beginning of the fight, and then towards the end of the fight, I actually got taken out as well. I cannot imagine what this boss is like on a high tyrannical key. I have no idea how those people survive those like 27 tyrannical keys. It's actually beyond me. So yeah, like I said, I took out to the Omen of Death at the end, but the guys get the boss down at the same time pretty much, and I gained 20 score, leaving me 20 score away from my 3k. Pretty happy with timing at 25. Like I said, it is SPG, so it doesn't really count, but we take those. On to Ruby Life Pools then. I'm just trying to pretty much get every single dungeon timed on at least a 22 here. So we start off with the big pool. Standard pool within these high keys. Just pull literally everything. Lust and send all your cooldowns. Do big damage. As you can see, we're all above 300k DPS here. Try and save your interrupts for the ice shield if you can. I should have taken Wailing Arrow in this dungeon, but I think I just forgot to take it, especially on Fortified. Like, I was kind of trolling by not taking that, but hey, we completed it anyway. Spoiler alert. Move on to the first boss, another boss that does some considerable damage even on Fortified, especially during the Frost Overload. I know Palas have found a way to, again, bug their Avenger's Shield for her Frost Overload pulsing cast, where they can just instantly interrupt it. But I don't think our tank friend managed to do that in this run, but we got the boss down pretty safely. Next, we move on to the scariest mob in the game on Fortified, Thunderhead. For each of these rolling thunder casts, you definitely want to use a defensive, especially on Fortified. Even if it doesn't go on you, it's still going to do a lot of damage to you from the other people that actually gain the debuff. I should have survived here. I should have pressed my turtle, but I think I just panicked. I had most of my defensives on cooldown already. But yeah, I definitely should have turtled here. I feel like I'm way too hesitant with my turtle button. Like, I always want to save it for like the optimal scenario, but turns out that was definitely an optimal scenario to use it. Fly back on up and head over to the destroyers, who's casting Inferno as I run over to it. Hunters and Night Elves, Rogues, you can feign death, shadow meld, all of that good stuff when the Inferno cast is about 80% of the way through its cast and stay dead or shadow melded, and you, for whatever reason, you don't actually take any damage from the Inferno. You don't get the dot or anything on you. Going around the ring here, again, another stupid death that I definitely should not have had. I let a Spiteful Shade get way too close to me, as well as taking a few ticks from the Blaze of Glory, I think, and it just takes me out. Our healer also died here, so I guess we can kind of blame the healer. I think he actually stood in a Blaze of Glory puddle, so I think that just one-shot him. But yeah, I definitely shouldn't have let that Spiteful Shade get so close. I could have trapped it. It's unfortunate that trap doesn't eliminate them as a mechanic, because they actually still take damage and break themselves out of the trap. But regardless, I didn't use it here. Again, I could have used a Binding Shot, anything to prevent this death. Another Destroyer pack here. We again send the Feigned Death to help out our healer, which actually ends up saving me because the rest of the group took the Inferno tick. And then I think the healer actually got meleeed by Spiteful Shade, so he just got one shot again. I probably would have ticked out at this point to the Inferno debuff and also Grievous, as I didn't have many of my defensives left, unless we got out of combat and I could have eaten, of course, but it is Spiteful, so they probably would have kept me in combat and then I would have died. Moving on to the second boss, the famous Pug Killer. The Demon Hunter actually gets taken out here, but I still could not tell you to this day what it was to. I'm thinking maybe he stepped in the fire puddle and it instantly killed him from 50%, but it didn't look to me like he actually stepped in it, so who knows? We get him back up. We continue pumping the boss at this point, baiting the boulder and also baiting the Blazebinder spawns. This dungeon always sketches me out because we have quite a bit of trash left to do. We haven't got the boss down yet, and we've only got like 9 minutes left on the counter, so I always feel very rushed at this point during this dungeon. I don't know how people manage to +2 this on a high key, because I feel like other than downstairs, you can't really do that many big pulls. That being said though, we do manage to clear out the rest of the trash pretty easily and start on the last boss with over 3 minutes left. So on a fortified week, we are more than chilling with this timer. For this fight, I normally like to put Karaka on my focus because you can actually see who he's targeting for the flame spit, so you could pre-defensive that for if it's coming in on you. And when he phases in and goes up and puts the flame spit on all three of us, I normally just pre-pop a defensive there just to be safe. Sometimes it does bite me though, because it doesn't actually go on me and then a later one goes on me and I don't have the defensives for it. But that's a risk I'm willing to take. As a hunter, we've got like 4 defensives that we can use, but it still can definitely get hairy. Then we take down Urquhart with just under 2 minutes to go, so we had quite a bit of spare time on this key. We probably could have timed it on a 23 if we had the key, but unfortunately we didn't. We gained 14 score out of that, so we are now 6 points away from 3k. Hey, and look at that overall real quick. We are pumping the damage. I have got some really bad news though. In typical fashion, my recording got corrupted for the key that actually tipped me over 3k. It was a 22 knocker defensive that I realistically should have timed a long time ago. I just got unlucky with pugs. I think I overtimed a 24 knocker defensive a few weeks back by like 10 seconds, so that would have been some huge score and I would have been long over 3k at this point. But with the reset on Tyrannical week, we needed a Tyrannical knocker defensive for some extra score. So I was actually doing this one live on stream and we had quite a pumper group, to be fair. Like, as you can see, this Boomy is blasting the overall already. We've got a Demon Hunter that's blasting as well. I think at this point I was actually using the new ring and testing that out, but I wasn't too happy with it in this dungeon. Like, I should be doing a lot more damage at this point. As a hunter in these first packs, if you place yourself the furthest away from these packs, the mobs will charge to you and put the bleed on you. But if you put a freezing trap in between you and the pack, then he will just charge into that and not actually put the bleed on you. So that can help your group out a lot, especially on fortified weeks. We start up the first boss, and this is where I start to realize that we might not be timing this key. The priest claims a disconnect, but I don't know how much I believe that. I mean, maybe it was genuine, maybe not, who knows? But I see the priest on my left here, and I see this eruption cast getting very close to finishing. So in a panic, I pop my turtle with no intention of doing the ballista myself, because why would I do that? Even though I'm probably the best DPS class in the game to actually do it. And the priest, you can see, is still running at this point. So it's definitely an interesting claim on the disconnect, as you see after we kill this boss. Because somehow we do actually manage to survive. And then, yeah, after we get him down, the priest is like, sorry, DC or something like that. And I was like, a little bit sussy, but anyway, we'll let him off. We carry on over to the scariest trash probably in this dungeon. I would say so, at least. We PogChamp the Chain Lightning there with a pre-turtle so that we don't take any damage. Make sure you actually get away from your group as well when that goes off, because obviously being a Chain Lightning, it will jump from you to the rest of your group and do big old damn. Then we start on definitely one of the scarier parts of this dungeon on a Tyrannical week. Even on a fortified week, to be fair. The Storm boss, some massive damage and healing throughput needed for the electrical storm phase. And I don't really know what happened here. I think 3 of the guys actually lined up their big bomb on each other and then just took out each other instantly. So that was always good to see. So we do end up wiping here, but I do think with the amount of DPS we're doing, this key is still timeable, as long as we don't mess up too much. Get back into the boss and we get the bomb overlap with Thundering, which, as I'm sure you've all been messed over with a few times, is not an overlap you want. The priest grips me and I absolutely poo myself because I think we're going to run it back on wiping. But luckily it was timed to perfection, obviously calculated at that point. And we clear our Thundering buff, and then I sprint out with the bomb so that we don't kill each other. Another terrifying boss in Tyrannical, especially for a squishy class like myself. Although I don't think Hunter is actually that bad anymore. We seem to have got consistent survivability buffs. Not the ones we'd hoped for, but I think the accumulation of all the buffs together has put us in definitely a solid spot. But you're still going to want to use the defensive for every single Gale Arrow. It still might even kill you at that point, depending on what defensive you actually use. But as a hunter, you're generally safe with either one of your defensive pop for every single one. And also, just to make things easier, you probably want to stack up with your ranged as well, so all the tornadoes spawn on top of you and then fly out and fly back in, all stacked on top of each other nicely. Note that this doesn't increase the damage you take from the initial hit either, so you're safe there. Our priest friend almost ints us here by stepping out slightly to the right for the Gale Arrow, and it ends up killing our Balance Druid just because one tornado was out of place and it just double ticked on him and killed him, I think. Like, if you're taking any damage directly after the Gale Arrow, you're probably gonna die. And we actually do take a little while here to combat res him and get him back up, so we lost some DPS there. But he still ends up on top of the DPS chart for this boss because Balance Druid is insane on this boss. We're good on percent here as well after the boss, so we fly on over to the last 2 mini bosses, take them out with ease, and start on the last boss. Like I said earlier, I thought we would be, and we are very comfy on time. We started this boss with over 6 minutes left, so as long as we play safe, then we should be chilling. Though in a pug, you're never safe. Goes into the intermission phase where we don't actually have lust for this because the tank should have pulled the 3rd boss earlier, and then we should have done some trash afterwards to reset the lust timers, which would have made this phase a lot easier. But nevertheless, I trapped the inner one as I was instructed to in party chat earlier, and the Demon Hunter imprisons the far left one. Somehow though, my mob actually gets broken out of the trap. I don't know how this happened. Maybe a ring proc or something like that. I know there was a few bugs with the ring actually breaking CC, or pulling mobs that you weren't in combat with. We do our best to kick up the mobs here, and ideally the Balance Druid would have silenced them when they were all together so that they got locked out, but it turns out he silenced one away from the group. The Demon Hunter stuns but gets taken out instantly. I probably could have actually saved us here. I didn't see that explosive in the back, and I'm not gonna lie, like, I'm just useless with explosives. So I definitely need to get better at that, but it actually took out the healer when he was probably focusing on pumping the healing, so we can probably chalk that one up as an L on my part. We do get the healer back up for the second phase, but we don't have another battle res for the Demon Hunter, unfortunately, so it is going to be a long old fight at this point. For some reason here, the Druid doesn't use the rock to bait the charge here, and he also doesn't bear form the actual spear itself, so he gets one shot by that. I don't know if he popped a bark skin or something like that for it. You'd hope so at this kind of key level on Tyrannical. The healer also gets clipped by the charge directly after, so now he's dead, and it's up to me and the tank to survive, which, if my tank was Mock, maybe we could probably do it, but then the tank falls over and I follow suit. We try and send the boss again just to complete it, like there's no way that we time it at this point. The Druid and Priest run out from the upheaval mechanic directly on top of each other, and it takes out the Priest, so we're already one man down for the scariest part of the phase, and then the Demon Hunter breaks my freezing trap. Apparently my freezing traps just aren't working today, so we accept defeat on this key and call it a day. So this is where our Raider IO ended up at the end of this episode. I have got a few more keys already recorded, so if you guys want to see another one of these episodes, then please feel free to drop a like down below, and obviously subscribe to your boy if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it, and until next time, I'll catch you guys later.